Doctor Who, one of the most successful shows to originate from Britain. Since its revival, it has had 4 Doctors, with the 5th one, Jodie Whittaker, set to start this autumn, and a new era going in with Chris Chibnall. It's been very successful, but there was a show before 2005 that I have only delved in a few times. That's why I'm going to start a new series where I review a story from each season of Doctor Who before its cancellation in 1989. It's time for the Pickles Parker Reviews Classic Review Series. So, hello everybody, welcome back to a new video from me, Pickles Parker Reviews, and today we're starting a new series, my classic review series, in which I review a classic story of Doctor Who from each classic season, from 1963 to 1989. Now today we're starting with a First Doctor story from the first season of Doctor Who, the Keys of Marinus. Now, let's just fill in on my classic knowledge. I've watched quite a few stories, but I've only probably watched about an 1/8 of Classic Who, maybe not even that. I've watched a few through choice, just like I want to watch some classic Doctor Who, and I've watched quite a few for the Big Blue Box podcast, and yeah, but I'd watched a few, but I only really got into Classic Who last year in 2017 when I was continuously watching it and getting more involved. And I wanted to do this series because I really wanted to get into Classic Who. I wanted to fill in my gaps of knowledge of Classic Who, and I really want to become more informed with Classic Who, because I always feel that I want to get more into the classic series because it is Doctor Who. And many people say, oh, you're not a true Doctor Who fan if you don't watch the classics. I've watched quite a few classics, but I just want to become a Doctor Who fan of all Doctor Who. So yeah, I just thought that this is a really good idea. Watch one classic story from each classic season, and set myself a challenge and watch more Classic Who, which is really good. So yeah, we're starting off with the Keys of Marinus. So it's the 5th story of the first season, and it's notable in its structure for being a bit different to your standard Classic Who serial of having one big story but put into different parts, because it is that, but each part is actually its own little story, part of a bigger one. It's a bit like the Key to Time season with Tom Baker, how in each story they were trying to find the key to time. It's a bit like this one, but they're trying to find where the Keys of Marinus, and each story is a different setting, and that's all very cool. And I think you get kind of 6 mini stories, which I think is a really cool idea, and it's sort of it almost makes it easier to watch it in different times, because as it's a 6-part, I didn't watch it all in one go. I watched it over several days, when I had a spare minute to watch like a part or two, and it worked really well, and I really liked the format. Obviously with other classic stories I think it can be a bit dragged out sometimes, especially 6-parters. Like if you get a pertwee 6-parter, that can be a slog to get through. Like the Time Monster, for example, which I am currently watching to review for the Big Blue Box podcast. That is a hell of a slog to get through. But this, I think, with its structure, is fairly well paced. Now, I've watched 3 stories from the first season so far of Doctor Who, not in this series, but just generally anyway. An Unearthly Child, obviously it's the first story. The Daleks, as it's obviously the first appearance of the Daleks, and The Edge of Destruction, because why not? But I really enjoyed this story, The Keys of Marinus. It wasn't what I was expecting. I think that it is more accustomed to classic Who, especially if you like Series 7 of New Doctor Who. If you like Series 7, where each week it's kind of its own blockbuster every week as they marketed it then this will definitely be one to look for. Yeah, onto the cast. William Hartnell, the First Doctor. Now, I've been on a really big First Doctor thing of late. Ever since listening to the First Doctor Adventures Big Finish. I know that's not Hartnell in it, but I still love Bradley as the First Doctor, and I still love the First Doctor in it. So that was ultimately that almost made me start the series in a way, because I wanted to watch more Hartnell, and that's what made me decide to watch the Keys of Marinus. And then I actually went on and watched the 2 next stories in my Hartnell part of this classic review series, because I was just really into him. And I've really found a love over these past couple of weeks for Hartnell's Doctor, and he's really gone up that favourite Doctors list. He's fantastic. But he's not in this a lot. He's probably absent for 3 parts of this. But I think he's still brilliant. Hartnell still plays it superbly, and I really love his Doctor. Then you've got Ian. William Russell gets a lot to do in this. And I love William Russell as Ian Chesterton. He's very good. Probably my favourite out of this early TARDIS team. And I think he gets a lot to do. And I think he, because Hartnell's a bit absent through parts, I think William Russell really carries this story. And he really works as the main protagonist in a way. I can really see a spin-off featuring Ian Chesterton work really well, because I think he's actually a really good character, and in a way he's not too dissimilar from some of the young modern Doctors, such as David Tennant and Matt Smith, that we get nowadays. And then we have Jacqueline Hill as Barbara Wright. Very good as well. She gets a lot to do, as well as Ian, and she's quite smart in this, which I think she is probably the first smart companion, and I think she's very good as well. I do like Barbara, and she gets a lot to do. Then we have Carol Ann Ford as Susan. I'm not a fan of Susan in this. She's just way too screamy. All she does is get captured and scream, get captured and scream, scared, get captured, scream. Practically in all parts she's captured. And I think she's a bit... I don't think Susan was ever utilised too well, but in this I think it really shows they really didn't know what to do with her. So yeah, not great, Susan. Overall, I really like this story. I think it was really good. I really like how it was split, a different story each part, if that helped easy viewing. And I think the cast were all good. I'm reading a First Doctor thing, so I enjoyed this. Speaking of the Vord, actually, they were very underused. I forgot to talk about the Vord. The Vord were incredibly underused, because I think they could have been a really good villain. I love the design of the Vord, but I think that they were incredibly underused, and they could have been so much more. And it's sad to see that they never returned in the classic era, because I think they could have been really good villains. especially in the 5th Doctor era of all eras. I think it will have really worked for a return for the Ward. But, yeah, they were heavily underused. But yeah, where was I? Overall, this story, I really like the, each part is a different story. That really works as easy viewing. I think the cast are all great, and I think Hartnell's superb, and William Russell really carries the story when Hartnell is absent. And I think that it was all very, very good. The Vord were underused, but nevertheless I thought it was a pretty good story, and definitely a very good story to kick off my classic review series. I give it an 8 out of 10. So, join me next week as I review the Season 2 story, The Dalek Invasion of Earth. But until then, bye-bye. So, The Seeds of Death. A good story. Pat Troughton is on top form as the Doctor, and the Ice Warriors are better than they've ever been. And you know I love the Ice Warriors. The whole TARDIS team gets something to do, and the idea of the rocket is a great one. One thing I will say is it, like a lot of early Doctor Who, it suffers from too long syndrome, and the story could have been easily narrowed down to 4 parts. But overall, it's a very good story, and I love the Ice Warriors, so bonus points. I give The Seeds of Death a 7 out of 10.